The blood is still warm on my hands when the Alpha King walks in. I do not move. I do not breathe. I stand there in the middle of the royal stable, with both palms pressed flat against Obsidian's neck, and the deep black wound beneath my fingers is already closing flesh, knitting together in real time, veins resealing, the horse's labored breathing slowing into something steady and calm. 3 palace guards are behind me. I heard them run in 30 seconds ago. They stopped when they saw me. None of them have spoken yet, and that silence is louder than anything I have ever heard in my life. The Alpha King is standing in the stable doorway. He is exactly as terrifying as every story ever claimed. 7 feet of solid northern muscle wrapped in a black military coat, silver rank marks running down both sleeves, a jaw cut from something that never learned to soften. His eyes are pale, gray, almost white, and they are locked directly on me with the kind of stillness that means a decision is already being made. Obsidian exhales under my hands. Long, slow, alive. The Alpha King looks at his horse. Then he looks at me. His gaze drops to my blood-stained palms. Then it comes back up to my face. One of the guards behind me speaks first. His voice shakes when he does it. He was alone with the horse when we found him, Your Majesty. The wounds, we don't know how they closed. The Alpha King still has not blinked. Obsidian shifts beneath my fingers, tilts his massive head toward me, and in a voice that only I can hear, low and dry and completely unbothered by the near-death experience he just survived, he says, You know, most people bring flowers when they want to impress a king. You went with blood. Bold strategy. I almost choke. This is not the moment. I know it is not the moment, but Obsidian has never once cared about moments. The Alpha King takes one slow step forward into the stable. What is your name, he says. Not a question. A command shaped like one. My mouth opens. Zeke, I say. Zeke Vick. I work in the stables. He is still looking at me the way a man looks at something he cannot yet classify. Not with anger, not with warmth, with the flat, calculating attention of someone running numbers. He looks at Obsidian one more time. The wound is completely gone. He looks back at me. Don't go anywhere, he says. Then he turns and walks back out, and the guards close the stable doors behind him. And I am left standing alone in the dark with a horse who almost died 20 minutes ago and is now, apparently, more interested in critiquing my social skills than processing any of it. You're shaking, Obsidian observes. I know I am shaking, I say through my teeth. It's unbecoming. You almost died. He says, in the tone of someone filing that away for later. The man who cut me, did you see his ring? I did. Gold. A serpent eating its own tail. Write that down somewhere in your memory, Obsidian says quietly, because that ring belongs to someone on the King's Council, and what just happened to me was not an accident. The stable goes very still. Outside, I hear the Alpha King's boots on the stone courtyard, slow and deliberate, walking away. And I realize standing here with blood on my hands and a secret in my ears that could get me killed that the last 3 days have been building to this exact moment. I just had no idea how fast everything was about to move. Chapter 1. The smell hits me first. Manure, wet straw, iron cold seeping through stone walls that have not been warmed since winter. I walk through the servants' entrance of Frostfang Palace, carrying everything I own in a canvas bag that is more patched than original fabric, and the first person I see is a stable worker twice my size leaning against a post with his arms crossed, looking at me the way people look at something they are already tired of. You're the new cleaner, he says. It is not a greeting. Yes, I say. He looks me over once, head to feet, feet to head. He does not hide what he finds. Small, he says. You look like you'd blow away in a strong wind. I do not answer that because there is no answer to it. He is not wrong. I am 22 years old, and I have the build of someone who grew up eating less than they needed. My family's farm in the Outer Ridge territory went to creditors 6 months ago. Every piece of land my father spent his life building went to cover a debt I found out about after it was already too late to do anything. And after 3 months of trying every other option, this is what is left. Frostfang Palace stable work, room and board included, 40 copper coins a month. I follow the stable worker through a long stone corridor that opens into the main stable block. The ceiling is high, the stalls stretch the length of a city block, torches burn along the walls every 10 feet. The smell of horse and hay fills everything. There are 12 other workers moving through the space. Every single one of them stops to look at me when I walk in. I count the seconds. 3, 4. Then they go back to what they were doing. None of them say anything. The stable manager, a thick man named Gorse, with a permanent expression that suggests he finds most of existence personally offensive, hands me a cleaning schedule and points at the far end of the block. Those 6 stalls are yours. You clean them twice a day. You don't touch the black stallion stall. You don't go near it. You don't look at it longer than you need to. You understand? Which one is the black stallion stall? I ask. Gorse looks at me like I just asked which direction is up. He points without speaking. The last stall on the left, larger than the others. The door is reinforced iron instead of wood. The slot at the top is covered with a heavy bar. Even from 40 feet away, I can feel something. It is not heat exactly, not sound. It is pressure, the way the air changes just before a storm decides to commit. I nod and look away from the stall. I start on my assigned section. The work is not complicated. It is only heavy and constant and thankless. I shovel, I replace straw, I scrub water troughs. The other workers move around me without speaking to me. 2 of them bump into me without apologizing. One of them kicks over a bucket I just filled and keeps walking. By the second hour, my back is burning and my hands are raw. By the third hour, a cavalry commander in a pressed uniform walks through inspecting the block. He is followed by 2 aides who write things down on small boards. He stops 3 feet from where I am working, looks at the stall I just finished, and shakes his head. That trough is still cloudy, he says to his aide. Not to me, about me, as if I am not standing right there holding the brush I used to clean it. It's the water source, sir, I say. The pipe feeding this end runs through. I didn't ask you, the commander says, still not looking at me. He walks away. I stand there with the brush in my hand and the trough that is actually cleaner than it has been in weeks, and I do not say anything else. I turn back and keep scrubbing. That is the thing about this kind of work, this kind of place. You learn very fast that your voice only counts if someone has already decided it does. Near the end of the shift, I am dumping the last bucket when I pass close to the reinforced stall at the end of the block. I am not stopping. I am not looking at it. I am following the instruction I was given very clearly, but something stops me anyway. Not a sound, not exactly. More like the absence of sound from that corner of the stable, a silence that is too complete, too deliberate, like something behind that iron door is holding its breath. I keep walking. I get to the other side of the block and release a breath I did not realize I had been holding. Gorse finds me at the end of the shift. He hands me a key to the servants' quarters on the east wing and tells me the morning schedule starts before sunrise. He is already walking away before he finishes the sentence. I stand in the middle of the stable block with my canvas bag over one shoulder and the key in my hand, and around me the workers are finishing up, snuffing torches, talking among themselves in that easy way that people who belong somewhere talk to each other. I look at the reinforced stall one more time, then the whole stable goes quiet. And from inside that stall, clearly and calmly, a deep voice says, "That commander has been skimming the feed supply for 4 months. I'd say someone should tell the king, but it's amusing watching him get away with it." Every hair on my body stands straight up. I turn completely around. The block is empty. Every worker has already left. The voice came from behind the iron door. Chapter 2. I do not sleep that night. I lie on the thin mattress in the servants' quarter and stare at the stone ceiling and tell myself what I heard was exhaustion. 6 months of bad luck and hard work and not enough food had finally cracked something in my head, and I imagined a voice in an empty stable, and in the morning it would make sense, the way strange things always make sense, after sleep settles the brain down. I believe this until I walk back into the stable block at dawn, and the voice says, before I have even made it 10 feet through the door, "You look worse than yesterday. That's impressive." Most people look at least marginally better after sleep. I stop walking. My cleaning brush is in my hand. The morning crew has not arrived yet. The torches are still being lit by the overnight watch, who is all the way on the far side of the block and has his back turned. The voice came from the reinforced stall. I walk toward it slowly. Then I stop myself. Then I walk toward it again because my feet apparently have their own opinion. I stop 4 feet from the iron door and look at it. The heavy bar across the viewing slot is still in place. "You can come closer," the voice says. I don't bite. I mean, technically I could, but I find it lacks elegance. My mouth opens. Then I close it. Then I open it again. "You're a horse," I say. "Astute," the voice says. "And you're in Omega Cleaning Stables. Neither of us is exactly where we expected to be. I look back over my shoulder. The overnight guard is still turned away. The morning crew is not here yet. I step closer to the iron door and drop my voice down to almost nothing. Horses don't talk, I say. And yet, the voice says, the bar on the viewing slot shifts, just slightly. I stare at it. Then it shifts again, pushed from the inside, and it slides far enough to open the slot an inch. One enormous dark eye appears in the gap. The eye looks at me. It is the deepest black I have ever seen, and it holds something behind it that does not belong in an animal's face. Intelligence. Old intelligence. The kind that has been watching things for a very long time. Only you can hear me, the voice says. I want to be direct about that before you go running to anyone. Every other person in this palace hears nothing but a horse. You hear me because of something in you that is different. I noticed it when you walked in yesterday. Different how? I say. I don't know yet, the voice says, which is somehow the most unsettling answer possible. But I find it interesting. I find very little interesting anymore. I stand there with my cleaning brush dangling from one hand and a rapidly deteriorating grip on what I thought the world was. What's your name? I say. Obsidian, the voice says. I wait for more. Nothing comes. Just obsidian? When you have been alive as long as I have, Obsidian says, with a dry weight that I do not yet understand the full meaning of, you tend to shed the extra syllables. The morning crew walks in behind me. I step back from the stall immediately and turn toward my section like I was never anywhere near the iron door. My heart is running a full sprint inside my chest. I pick up a rake and start working. I spend the next 2 hours trying to process what is happening to me. By midday, I have decided on a system. I will act normal. I will do my work. When the stable empties, I will go back to the stall and get more information. I will not tell anyone. Not because I have a strategy yet, simply because if I tell anyone what I heard, they will remove me from the palace and I have nowhere else to go. It works until the afternoon commander inspection. A different commander today, younger, better dressed. He walks through with 3 aides and stops near the water station while I am working 2 stalls down. He is loudly telling one of his aides about a noble family's financial arrangement with the palace supply chain, specific numbers, specific names, the kind of information that definitely does not get discussed in front of stable workers, because stable workers do not count. From behind the iron door, clearly audible to only me, Obsidian says, the Dreven family. He just named them. Remember that name. They have been diverting palace grain shipments for 8 months. That commander knows because he gets a cut. I keep my face completely neutral. The commander finishes his inspection and walks out without looking at me once. I finish my shift and wait. When the block finally empties at dusk, I walk back to the iron door. The viewing slot is already open. The Dreven family, I say. You remembered, Obsidian says. You said they've been diverting shipments. For 8 months. The evidence is in the 3rd ledger of the Eastern Treasury, entries marked with a double line in the left margin. Nobody has thought to look because nobody suspects the people handling the audit are the same people committing the diversion. I stare at the eye in the slot. How do you know that? Because people talk freely near horses, Obsidian says. They always have. They forget we are listening. Or they assume we cannot understand. Either way, I have been listening for a very long time, and the things I have heard in this stable would collapse this kingdom in a week if they were ever spoken aloud. Something cold moves down my spine. You said that commander who inspected today gets a cut, I say. He does. And the noble who was here 3 days ago, the one smiling at the king? Obsidian's eye holds mine through the slot. Lord Cavendreth, he says. He will move against the king within the week. I almost laugh. It sounds impossible. Lord Dreth is one of the king's most public supporters. Then 4 days later, Lord Dreth's personal guard attempts to intercept the Alpha King's supply convoy on the northern road. The attempt fails. But it happens. Exactly the way Obsidian said it would. Chapter 3. The Alpha King comes to the stable on a Thursday. Not for an inspection, not with a retinue. He comes alone, which according to Gorse has never happened before in the 6 years he has been stable manager. And Gorse says this in the flat, horrified tone of someone watching a law of nature get casually repealed. I am in the middle of scrubbing the 3rd trough when the stable doors open and the air in the room changes. That is the only way I can describe it. 1 second, the air is just air. Then the door opens and every worker in the block goes rigid, backs straightening, brushes freezing mid-stroke, heads dropping to study the ground with sudden, intense interest. I do not look up immediately. I am scrubbing a trough. I have been scrubbing it for 10 minutes, and it is almost done, and I have learned in the past week that unfinished work in this palace is a faster way to get removed than any mistake. Then a shadow falls across the trough. I look up. The Alpha King is standing 6 feet from me, arms loose at his sides, watching me work. Up close, he is even more unreasonable. The size alone, the stillness. Most powerful people fill a room with noise commands, movement, the performance of authority. This man fills a room by doing absolutely nothing, and somehow that is worse. You're the one they call Zeke, he says. Yes, Your Majesty, I say. I set the scrubbing brush down slowly and stand up straight. He is looking at me with that same calibrating expression from the first time, in the hook. In the moment that I now understand was not the first time he had thought about me, but was the first time I had earned enough of his attention to get looked at directly. The Dreven Ledger discrepancy, he says. Someone submitted an anonymous report to the Treasury 3 days ago, accurate to the specific entry line. I say nothing. His pale eyes do not move from my face. The convoy ambush. Someone warned my personal guard 2 hours before it happened. Anonymous source. I say nothing. I find anonymous sources interesting, the Alpha King says, especially ones who appear to have started working in my stable 9 days ago. Behind me, from the iron stall, Obsidian says quietly, he already knows it was you. He is not here to accuse you. He is here because he cannot figure out how you know. I keep my face neutral through pure physical discipline. I don't know what you're referring to, Your Majesty, I say. The Alpha King looks at me for 3 long seconds. Then something at the edge of his mouth shifts. Not a smile. The ghost of the concept of one. Of course not, he says. He moves past me toward the reinforced stall. He stops in front of the iron door and looks at it the way a man looks at something he loves and does not have a language for. He lifts his hand and places his palm flat against the iron surface. He was restless last night, the Alpha King says. Not to me, not to anyone specifically, just aloud. He was restless, Obsidian confirms. Again, only to me. Because someone walked through the stable after midnight wearing the serpent ring, and I wanted to bite them and thought better of it. I file that away immediately. The Alpha King turns back toward me. He looks at the trough I was scrubbing. He looks at the surrounding stalls. He looks at me. Your work section is cleaner than any other section in this block, he says. Thank you, Your Majesty. I wasn't complimenting you, he says. I was stating a fact. I'm trying to decide what to do with facts. He watches me for another moment. I hold his gaze because dropping it feels like a surrender I cannot afford. Then from behind me, 2 stalls down, another worker fumbles a bucket and it clangs against the stone floor, and the Alpha King's attention moves there instantly, sharp and total, and the worker flinches so hard he stumbles. Carry on, the Alpha King says to the room. Then he turns and walks out. I release a breath that takes most of my remaining composure with it. He was watching you before he walked in, Obsidian says from the stall. Through the side window on the east wall. He watched you work for 4 minutes before he came through the door. Why are you telling me that? I say under my breath. Because information is the only currency that matters in this palace, Obsidian says, and you are going to need a great deal of it very soon. I pick up the scrubbing brush and go back to the trough. 2 hours later, near the end of my shift, I am collecting the last of the dirty straw from the far corner when I notice it, movement, high up. There is a narrow maintenance walkway along the upper wall of the stable, used for checking the ventilation shafts. It is accessed through a door on the 2nd level of the east wing, a door I was told is only open during quarterly maintenance checks. Someone is up there. They are still, watching the stable floor. I cannot see their face in the shadow, but I can see the outline of their hand resting on the railing, and on the 3rd finger of that hand, even from 40 feet below in flickering torchlight, I can see the dull gold glint of a ring shaped like a serpent eating its own tail. I force my eyes back down to the straw. I keep working. I do not look up again, but my hands are not steady when I carry the last bucket out. Chapter 4. 3 things happen on the morning of my 12th day at Frostfang Palace, and they happen fast enough that by the time I understand the shape of all 3, I am already standing in front of Gorse being accused of something I spent 40 minutes preventing. It starts before the morning crew arrives. I am in early because Obsidian woke me up. He does not have a way to physically reach me in the servants' quarters. What he does, I have now learned, is push a sound into the air of the stable, a low, sustained pressure that I feel in my back teeth at a frequency no one else seems to register. It woke me at 4 in the morning and I lay there for 60 seconds arguing with my own exhaustion before I got up and walked across the dark courtyard to the stable block. West Feed Corridor, Obsidian said the moment I came through the door. Right now, I went. The West Feed Corridor runs behind the main stall block. It is where the grain supply for the day gets staged before distribution. It is narrow, unlit except for 2 wall torches, and it smells like dust and something else this morning. Something sharp and chemical underneath the grain scent. I find it 6 feet in. Someone has gotten into the main grain barrel, the one that feeds into the automated distribution line for the morning feeding cycle. The top is askew. There is a small cloth pouch inside, half submerged in the grain. I pull it out without thinking. The drawstring is loose. Inside is a dark powder that clings to my fingers when I touch the edge of it and immediately makes my fingertips feel hot and wrong. I drop the pouch. Poison, Obsidian says from the main block, projecting his voice toward me. Slow acting, not enough to kill outright. Enough to make every horse in this block too sick to run within 6 hours. The cavalry inspection for the Eastern campaign is this afternoon. I stare at the pouch on the floor. If the horses cannot run today, I say slowly, the campaign deployment gets delayed by a minimum of 2 weeks, Obsidian says, which gives someone 2 more weeks to complete something they need finished before the King's army moves east. I pick the pouch up using the hem of my shirt. I look at the barrel. I look at the distribution line. The morning feeding cycle starts in 40 minutes. I spend the next 40 minutes on my hands and knees in the West Feed corridor, removing every grain that has made contact with the corrupted section of the barrel. I find 2 more cloth pouches tucked against the interior walls. I wrap all 3 in the same section of my shirt and carry them to the back drainage area and bury them in ash from the disposal pit. Then I go back and report to Gorse that the West Corridor grain barrel needs to be replaced due to moisture compromise, and I use the most boring, administrative tone I am capable of producing. Gorse looks at me. He does not believe me, but he is the kind of man who deals with one problem at a time, and the problem in front of him right now is a potential grain issue before a major cavalry inspection. So he calls for a replacement barrel. The morning feeding goes forward without incident. By mid-morning, the cavalry block is fully operational, every horse in peak condition, and the inspection commander walks through with his assessment board and checks off each animal with the satisfied efficiency of a man whose afternoon is about to go exactly as planned. He stops in front of my work section. He turns to Gorse. This section's stalls are clean, he says, with the specific inflection of someone surprised by that. Gorse says nothing. The commander looks at me. You're the new worker. Yes, I say. He makes a small note on his board and moves on. Gorse waits until the inspection team has cleared the building. Then he walks over to me with an expression I have not seen on his face before. Not warmth. Gorse does not do warmth, but something that is at least 1 notch above baseline contempt. The grain barrel in the West Corridor, he says. Yes, I say. How did you know? I was in early, I say. I notice the smell. He holds my gaze for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then he makes a sound that is not quite an acknowledgement and is not quite dismissal, and walks away. The other workers have been watching all of this. I can feel it. The 2 who used to bump into me without apologizing do not bump into me for the rest of the day. The one who kicked over my bucket 3 days ago moves out of my path when I walk through the corridor. It is not respect yet. It is nothing as clear as respect. It is just the shift that happens in a room when people recalibrate what they assumed. By end of shift, the lead stable hand, a sharp-faced man named Riv, who has worked at the palace for 11 years and has not said a full sentence to me until now, walks past me and says, without stopping, "Good eye this morning." 2 words. Moving. Not looking back. I stand there. Enjoy it, Obsidian says from the stall, because someone noticed their plan failed, and now they are trying to figure out how. And their 3rd finger has a very specific ring on it, and they are going to start asking questions about the new stable worker who keeps being in the right place. The stable lights flicker overhead, wind against the torch flames. Tonight, Obsidian says, someone is going to deliver a message to that person. The message will say your name. Chapter 5. The Alpha King comes back on a Tuesday, and he does not leave for 2 hours. He does not announce himself this time either. He comes through the east entrance at the end of the main shift, when the block is nearly empty, when the last workers are putting away tools and heading toward the meal hall, and there are only 3 of us left in the space, including me. The other 2 are gone within 5 minutes. I stay because Obsidian made that low-frequency pressure in my back teeth again that morning and said, very clearly, stay late today. So, I stay. I and the Alpha King walks in at the precise moment I am pretending to organize a supply shelf I have already organized twice. He does not look surprised to find me here. He also does not acknowledge that I am here. Not at first. He walks to Obsidian's stall and does what he did the first time, places his palm flat against the iron door. But today he also speaks. You've been agitated, he says to Obsidian. Low, private, the voice of a man who is used to talking to something that he believes cannot respond. Only because this palace is full of idiots, Obsidian says to me, not to the king. I press my lips together and turn back to the shelf. I've been trying to figure out the grain incident, the Alpha King says. He is still facing the iron door. Nobody can explain how the contamination was caught before the feeding cycle. The corridor logs show one worker entered early, the same worker who submitted the treasury report, the same one who warned my guard about the convoy. He turns. He looks at me directly. The same worker who is currently very interested in that supply shelf, he says. I turn around. I meet his eyes. There is no point pretending. I was in early, I say. I smelled something wrong. You said that before, he says. He walks closer. Not fast, not threatening, but steady. The way a man walks when he has already decided on a direction and is just covering the distance. He stops 10 feet from me. I've been told you have no combat record, no family connections, no Omega designation beyond standard class. You came from the Outer Ridge territories with debt clearance papers and a work request. You have been in this palace for 12 days. He tilts his head slightly. In 12 days, you have prevented a treasury fraud, warned against a supply ambush, and stopped a cavalry sabotage. Alone, with no resources, and no explanation I can verify. I say nothing. There is nothing to say that would not make this worse. He takes one more step forward, 9 feet now. I'm not angry, he says, and his voice shifts slightly when he says it, still controlled, still precise, but something underneath it that is not the tone of a ruler assessing a problem. I'm confused, and I have very little tolerance for things I can't understand. Respectfully, I say, you don't need to understand it for it to be useful. The second the words leave my mouth, I know they were too much, too direct, too fast. I'm a stable cleaner talking to a king, and I just told him he doesn't need to understand something. He stars at me. Then so small I almost miss it, that same ghost of something moves across his face. The concept of amusement seen from a great distance. No, he says quietly. I suppose I don't. He turns and walks back toward Obsidian's stall. He leans against the wall beside it with his arms crossed and looks at nothing in particular, and the atmosphere in the stable shifts into something that is not tension exactly, something more complicated than that. You eat with the general staff? He asks. And the stable crew has a separate meal arrangement, I say. He nods once, a brief, deciding nod. That changes starting tomorrow. No, I stare at him. Your Majesty, that's a decision, he says, that I've made. Obsidian, from behind the iron door, says to me in the full volume private voice that no one else can hear. He made that decision 3 days ago. He just needed an excuse to say it out loud. I focus very hard on keeping my face composed. Over the next 6 visits, because he comes back every single evening that week, always alone, always through the east entrance, always when the block is nearly empty, a shape forms between us. He talks. Not much. A sentence here, 2 there. About the campaign. About the council meetings that run long. About the northern border weather. Normal things. King things. I listen. I respond when I am supposed to. I do not ask for anything. But on the 6th night, standing near Obsidian's stall while the last torch at the far end burns low, the Alpha King says, "Tell me something true." I look at him. "Something nobody in this palace knows," he says. It is not a command this time. It is something else entirely. I think about it. My father used to say that the land talks to you if you're quiet enough to hear it. I say. I never believed him until we lost the farm. Then I understood it. It was the last thing he said to me that meant anything. The stable is quiet. The Alpha King looks at me for a long moment. My father said something similar about wolves, he says. That they speak in weight, not words. That you know what a wolf intends before it moves because the air changes. He pauses. I believed him even less than you believed yours. Something about the way he says it lands differently than everything else he has said. Personal, unguarded. The specific quality of something that was never meant to leave the inside of a person. Outside the stable doors, a figure passes the east window. Moving fast. Hood up. I see the hand. The serpent ring catches torchlight for half a second and disappears. Obsidian says nothing. But I feel it, that low pressure in my back teeth, and it does not stop. Chapter 6. The low pressure in my back teeth does not stop all night. I lie on my mattress in the servants' quarter and stare at the ceiling and count the seconds between each pulse of it. And by the third hour, I understand it is not going to fade the way it usually does when Obsidian finishes delivering a warning. This time it stays. Constant, insistent, like a finger pressed against a bruise that will not lift. I am back in the stable before the overnight guard finishes his last round. Obsidian's viewing slot is already open. The man with the ring, I say before I even reach the door. Counselor Marin Voss, Obsidian says. Senior trade advisor. 14 years in the King's Council. He was in the stable last night after you left. He stood in the west corridor for 11 minutes. He was looking at the grain barrel you had replaced. I press my back against the stall wall and slide down until I am sitting on the stable floor. Cold stone through my clothes. I do not care. He knows I found the pouches, I say. He suspects, Obsidian says, which in practical terms is the same thing. He does not yet know how you found them or what you know about the ring, but he is methodical. He will work backward from the grain barrel to the anonymous treasury report to the convoy warning, and he will arrive at your name with or without additional evidence. How long? I say. 3 days, Obsidian says. Maybe 4 if he is being careful. He is usually careful. I press the back of my head against the iron door. Tell me what you know about him, I say. Obsidian is quiet for exactly 3 seconds. That is rare. Obsidian is almost never quiet. Marin Voss has been working against the royal bloodline for 9 years, he says. Not alone. He is the visible hand of something much larger. There is a faction inside the council, 4 members, possibly 5 who have been positioning to replace the current Alpha King with a puppet ruler from the Outer Alliance territories. The plan requires the Eastern campaign to fail. If the campaign fails, the king loses military credibility. If he loses military credibility, the council gains the legal standing to call a governance review. A governance review, under Northern Charter law, suspends royal command authority for 40 days. I stare at the stable floor. 40 days is enough time for them to install someone, I say. 40 days is more than enough, Obsidian says. I think about the Alpha King leaning against the wall beside this stall 6 nights ago, talking about his father and wolves and the weight of things left unsaid. I think about how he looked in that moment, not like a king, like a person, like someone who had not been spoken to honestly in a very long time. They are going to move soon, I say. Within the week, Obsidian says. The next attempt will not be against the horses. I look up at the slot. What does that mean, I say. It means the next target is someone the king trusts, Obsidian says. Someone close enough to damage him without touching him directly. The stable is very quiet. Me, I say. Obsidian says nothing for 2 full seconds. You, he confirms. The investigation starts 3 days later, and it moves fast. I know it is coming because Riv, the lead stable hand who said good eye to me 12 days ago, comes to find me in the west corridor with the specific look of someone delivering news they do not want to deliver. Gorse wants you, he says. Gorse is in the stable manager's office, which is a room the size of a large closet with a desk pressed against the wall and a lantern that flickers every time anyone breathes near it. He is standing when I walk in. 2 men I have never seen before are sitting in the room's 2 chairs. They are wearing the gray and silver sash of the Palace Investigation Unit. Close the door, Gorse says. I close it. One of the investigators opens a leather folder on the desk. He slides a single sheet of paper toward me without looking up. This is a report of irregularities in the Western supply logs, he says. Your name appears as the worker on duty for several of the flagged shifts, specifically the shift preceding the grain barrel replacement. I look at the paper. It has my name on it. The log entries are real. The dates are real. The handwriting at the bottom, the signature that is supposed to be mine, is also there. But I did not sign it. Someone copied my signature from the intake forms I filled out on my first day. The lines are close, but the pressure is wrong. I notice it immediately because I am looking for it. I didn't write that signature, I say. The investigator looks up for the first time. It matches your intake documentation. It almost does, I say. He looks at it again. He looks at me. Something shifts slightly in his expression, the micro adjustment of a man who expected this to go differently. We'll need you available for further questioning, he says. Do not leave the palace grounds. I walk out of the office and down the west corridor and back into the main stable block, and I stand in the center of it under the high stone ceiling with torches burning along the walls, and I understand with total clarity that someone just built a case against me and it is 3/4 finished. Obsidian says, from behind the iron door. The second investigator, the one who didn't speak, look at his left hand. The great, I turn. Through the stable block window that faces the east courtyard, I can see the two investigators walking toward the main building. The second one has his hands clasped behind his back. On his left ring finger, catching afternoon light for one clean half-second before he rounds the corner, a serpent eating its own tail. Chapter 7. The accusation comes at sunrise with 6 guards at my door. Not a knock, a pull. The door opens from the outside because palace servants' quarters do not lock from within, and I am already sitting up on the mattress because Obsidian's pressure signal has been running through my back teeth since 3 in the morning, and sleep stopped being an option sometime around 4. The guards are in full formal uniform, brass buttons, red collar insignia, the kind of dress that means this is not a routine questioning, this is a public action, something that is meant to be seen. Zeke Vic, the lead guard says, you are required in the central hall. I stand up. I put on my boots. I walk with them through the courtyard in the early morning dark, and I count the guards the way Obsidian taught me to count things, not with panic, with information. 6 guards for 1 stable cleaner. That number is not about containment. That number is about optics. The central hall is full. Not packed, not a crowd, but every senior council member is present, standing along the far wall in their formal robes. 2 military commanders are to the left of the main platform. Palace administrative staff fill the gallery rows. Gorse is there, Riv is there. Every stable worker I have stood next to for the past 3 weeks is in this room, standing along the right wall, all of them looking at me with expressions that range from shock to carefully neutral. Marin Voss is standing at the center of the platform. He is a thin man. I have only seen him from a distance until now. Up close, he has the specific quality of someone who has spent decades being underestimated, forgettable face, soft voice, mild posture. The kind of person who does not need to be loud because every structure in the room already works for him. He holds a stack of papers. Zeke Vic, he says, in the tone of someone reading a formal charge. Stable worker, Class 3. You have been identified as the source of falsified supply records, specifically the destruction and concealment of palace grain inventory in the western corridor on the morning of the 14th. You are additionally under investigation for unauthorized access to Treasury documentation and the transmission of classified military movement data to parties outside the palace. The room is completely silent. I stand in the center of it. Those charges are false, I say. The documentation disagrees, Voss says. He holds up the paper with my copied signature. He holds up a second document, a Treasury access log with my name on a date I was not anywhere near the Treasury building. He holds up a third, a written communication, supposedly in my hand, addressed to an outer territory contact. I look at the third document. I have never seen it before. The handwriting is very good, better than the signature copy. Someone spent real time on this one. I want to see the Alpha King, I say. A ripple goes through the room. Not loud, just movement, the specific collective shift of people who were not expecting that. Voss does not react. He has been waiting for it. His Majesty has been informed of the situation, Voss says. Given the severity of the charges, he has agreed to allow the council to handle the initial proceeding. My chest goes cold. Kaler agreed to let the council handle this. I look at the doors on the far side of the hall, closed, heavy oak, brass handles. He was given false information about me first, I say, loud enough for the room. You are not in a position to speculate about royal briefings, Voss says, and for the first time, the mildness in his voice cracks just enough to show what is underneath it. Confidence. Complete and structural. The confidence of a man who built this trap over 9 years and is watching it close. One of the council members along the wall, a woman in deep blue robes, senior rank mark on her collar, steps forward slightly. The preliminary ruling recommends immediate suspension of stable access and palace residency pending full investigation, she says. In practical terms, removal from palace grounds. C. Exile. I look at the room, all of it, every face. The stable workers along the right wall. Riv, standing very still, jaw tight. Gorse, looking at the floor. The commanders. The council members. All of these people who have watched me work for 3 weeks, who have seen what I prevented and said nothing formally, because formally it was never their business. None of them speak. The doors on the far side of the hall open. The Alpha King walks in. Not at a run, not with urgency. He walks in the specific, deliberate way that means he made a decision before he crossed the threshold, and he is done reconsidering it. He is in full military dress, every rank mark visible. His pale eyes sweep the room once and land on me. He crosses to the center platform in 12 steps. He stops beside Voss. He looks at the documents in Voss's hand. He takes them. He looks at each one for exactly the amount of time it takes to read them, which tells me he has seen them before, tonight, before he came in. He looks at me. "Do you have anything to say?" he says. Not an accusation, not warmth, the specific neutrality of someone who has made a private decision and needs one more data point before they act on it publicly. The signature on that first document was copied from my intake forms, I say. Look at the pen pressure on the bottom loop of the V. Mine closes right, that one closes left. The hall does not breathe. The Alpha King looks at the signature. He looks at it for a long time. Then he looks at Marin Voss. And Voss, for the first time in everything I have watched him do in this room, goes completely still. "Counselor," the Alpha King says, in a voice that has dropped into a register I have not heard from him before. "Explain the pen pressure." Chapter 8. Voss does not explain the pen pressure. He does not explain anything. He straightens his robe instead, adjusts the papers in his hand, and opens his mouth to redirect to say something procedural, something that moves the room's attention off the signature and back to the weight of the charges, which he knows is heavier than one mismatched loop on a letter. But the Alpha King does not let him redirect. "Stop," Kaler says, one word. And it lands in the room the way a stone lands in still water, total and immediate, and spreading outward in every direction. Voss stops. Kaler turns to the military commander on the left. "Bring me the original intake documentation for Zeke Vick from the administrative archive, now." The commander moves immediately, no hesitation. The door opens and closes behind him. The hall holds its silence while we wait. Voss stands perfectly still. I stand perfectly still. The entire council along the wall stands perfectly still, and for the first time since I walked into this room, I understand something. Not all of them knew. 4 or 5, Obsidian said. Possibly 5. The woman in deep blue who pushed for my removal, she knew. The man at the end of the row, gray beard, silver rank collar, who has not looked up from the floor since Kaler walked in, he is calculating something. The others looked genuinely uncertain, which means they were handed the same documents Voss presented and trusted the framing. The commander returns in 4 minutes with a sealed administrative folder. Kaler opens it himself. He finds my original intake form. He holds it next to the forged document. He does not compare it out loud. He simply holds both papers up toward the nearest torch bracket and angles them so the light comes through the back of both sheets simultaneously. The intake form casts the shadow of my actual handwriting. The forged document's V closes the wrong way. Even in silhouette, projected against the stone wall of the central hall, the difference is clear. This document is forged, Kaler says. The room exhales. The woman in deep blue robes takes one controlled step backward. The man with the gray beard finally looks up from the floor, and his face has rearranged itself into an expression of carefully constructed shock, and I recognize that expression because I have been watching Obsidian read people for 3 weeks. It is the face of someone deciding how far they can distance themselves from a sinking plan. Kaler turns to Voss. Voss is still holding his remaining papers. His hands have not moved. His expression has not broken. This is, I understand now, a man who has operated in this palace for 14 years by never letting his expression break, regardless of what happens around him. And he is calling on every year of that practice right now. Your Majesty, Voss says, a forged document raises serious questions about who had access to the intake archive and why questions that themselves point toward Counselor Voss, Obsidian says. The voice comes from the main stable block across the courtyard. Except the main stable block is across the courtyard, separated from the central hall by 60 feet of open space and 2 stone walls. And the sound should not be audible in this room. Every head turns toward the eastern wall. I hear it clearly because I always hear it clearly. But from the expressions moving across every face in the hall, from the way Gorse's hand drops to his side, and Riv takes a half step forward, and the council members nearest the wall actually move away from it, they are all hearing it too. For the first time in whatever length of time Obsidian has been alive, he is not speaking only to me. His voice fills the hall like a sound that is coming from inside the stone itself, deep and clear, and carrying the specific weight of something very old, choosing, deliberately, to be heard. Counselor Marin Voss, Obsidian says again. Senior Trade Advisor, Council Appointment, Year 14. Ring registered to the Outer Alliance Trade House, the Vareth family. Purchased, not inherited. Purchased in the same month that the first falsified supply report appeared in the palace records 9 years ago. The room does not move. I have watched this palace for a long time, Obsidian says. I have watched every king who has stood in this hall. I watched Kaler's father. I watched his grandfather. I was here before the Northern Charter was written, before the boundaries of this kingdom were drawn. I was placed here to watch, and I have watched. And what I have watched Marin Voss do over 9 years inside these walls is enough to end 3 lifetimes. Voss's composure breaks. Not dramatically, not with a shout or a movement. It breaks the way old wood breaks silently, from the inside, the surface holding for 1 extra second before the structure underneath it fails. His chin drops a fraction. His hands, still holding his papers, tighten once and then go loose. The Eastern Treasury Ledger, Obsidian continues. The third book, entries marked with double lines in the left margin, Dreven, Harsel, Colton Procurement, Northern Supply Group, all of them front accounts under Voss's family name. The convoy ambush commissioned through a contact in the Outer Ridge territories named Farron Cade. The grain poisoning ordered 11 days ago, using a courier who met Voss in the Lower Market District at the 4th hour of evening. Kaler's face, as Obsidian speaks, goes through something I have never seen it go through. Not anger first, something before anger. The specific grief of a man hearing the full shape of a betrayal that has been living inside his house, close enough to breathe the same air, for 9 years. Then the anger arrives. And it is very quiet, which is worse. How, Voss says, to the room, to no one, his voice stripped of the mild procedural tone. How is a horse? I was not always a horse, Obsidian says. The hall goes arctic. My name, before this form, was Aldrich Sene. I was the kingdom's chief strategist under Kaler's grandfather. When I learned of a plot to destroy the bloodline from within, I chose to remain. The method of remaining was not one I would have chosen twice, but I chose it once, and I have kept my word for 130 years. Kaler looks at the eastern wall. His mouth opens slightly. 130 years? He says. Your grandfather was a good man, Obsidian says. Your father argued with everyone and was usually right. You inherited both qualities which has made you very difficult and also very hard to break. I want you to know that has not been an accident. I have been paying attention. The silence that follows is the most complete silence I have ever experienced. Then the coup begins. The main hall doors burst open. 8 armed men in the colors of the Outer Alliance enter fast, blades already drawn, moving in the trained pattern of people executing a plan they rehearsed. They are fast. They are organized. 2 go for Kaler directly. They are not fast enough. Because Obsidian's iron stall door, 60 feet and 2 stone walls away, blows open from the inside. Chapter 9. The iron door does not break. It comes off. The hinges shear clean at the base, both of them simultaneously, and the door drops outward into the stable block corridor with a sound like a cannon going off inside a cathedral. I hear it from the central hall because everyone in the central hall hears it, a percussion so heavy it travels through 60 feet of stone floor and arrives in the room as a vibration in the chest. The 8 armed men hesitate for exactly half a second. That half second is everything. Kaler moves faster than I have ever seen a person move. He takes the nearest attacker's blade wrist before the man's feet have fully planted, rotates it outward, and the blade drops. He picks it up. He does not look behind him when the second attacker comes. He steps aside and the second man's momentum carries him past, and Kaler puts an elbow into the back of his neck and he goes down hard. 2 of the remaining 6 split off toward the council wall. They are not going for council members. They are going for the document case that holds the Northern Charter, the governance papers that define succession law, the papers a coup needs to control before it does anything else. Riv gets there first. I do not know when Riv moved. I do not know when I moved either, because I am running across the hall floor and my legs are doing it before my head has authorized the decision. Riv gets his body in front of the document case and takes a hit to the shoulder that spins him sideways, and I come in from the left and the attacker does not see me as a threat. I am an Omega, small, no combat record, no reason to register as dangerous, and that mistake costs him the next 4 seconds because I drop below his center of gravity and drive my full weight into his knees. He goes down. He comes back up faster than I expected, and his hand goes for my collar, and I am genuinely calculating whether this is where my usefulness to the world ends. Then something hits the hall's east wall from the outside. The stone does not crack, but the entire wall moves. A single impact from the outside at shoulder height, and the stone shifts inward by 2 inches, and dust rains down from the ceiling, and every person in the room goes still for 1 full second. Obsidian hits the wall a second time. This time a block comes loose. The attacker holding my collar drops me and stares at the wall, and I roll clear and get to my feet, and across the hall I can see Kaler working through the remaining men with the controlled efficiency of someone who has fought before and did not enjoy it and got very good at ending it fast. The man with the gray beard, the council member who had been calculating breaks for the side exit, he does not make it. The woman in deep blue robes is directly in his path. She turns as he reaches her, and she holds up one hand, and she says in a voice like a door closing, "Sit down, Henner." He stops. She turns to the room. She looks at Voss, who has not moved from the center platform since Obsidian spoke. She looks at Kaler. "I will give you everything," she says to Kaler. "Every meeting, every document, every name. I want protection in exchange. Full council testimony." "Who are you?" I say, before I can stop myself. She looks at me. "Someone who got in too far and has been looking for a door out for 3 years. She looks back at Kaler. "Voss does not have the Outer Alliance contact yet. You have a window of approximately 6 hours before they know the coup failed and pull their assets out of reach permanently." Kaler looks at her for 2 seconds. "Take her to the secure room," he says to the commander beside him. "Full guard, no one in or out until I get there." She goes without resistance. The remaining attackers are on the floor. Voss has not moved. He is standing in the center of the platform with his mild face and his loose hands in his papers, and he looks like a man who has finished computing something and arrived at a number he does not like. Kaler walks up to the platform. He looks at Voss for a long time without speaking. "The forged signature," Voss says finally. "It was not intended to hold forever, only long enough to remove the boy from the palace before you attached any value to him." "You knew I had attached value to him," Kaler says. Voss looks at me briefly. "You visited the stable 10 times in 3 weeks. You altered his meal arrangement. You are not a man who does those things for staff he finds unremarkable." He looks back at Kaler. "I needed him gone before he became a problem. He had already disrupted 3 separate operations. 4, Obsidian says, from somewhere outside the building." Voss closes his eyes for 1 second. "When the Outer Alliance contact network is pulled apart over the following 72 hours using every piece of information the woman in blue robes provides, cross-referenced against 9 years of records that Obsidian catalogs from memory with the specificity of a man who has been waiting a very long time to say all of its 6 names emerge. 6 council members, the faction Obsidian described. The final name is someone Kaler has known since childhood. Kaler goes quiet when he hears it. Not the controlled quiet of a king processing information, the specific quiet of a person absorbing something that costs them in a place where nothing can help. He does not speak for 4 minutes. Then he looks at me across the length of the records room, where I have been sitting on a bench against the wall because no one told me to leave and I did not want to leave him alone with it. "You knew about Voss before the signature," he says. "Yes," I say. "For how long?" "Before the grain incident." He absorbs that. "And you stayed anyway." "I stayed," I say. He looks at me the way he looked at his own reflection in the forged document, trying to find the place where the image diverges from the real thing and finding that it does not. Then he crosses the room. He does not stop at a professional distance. He stops close enough that I have to look up to see his face, and his face is doing something I have never seen it do. Not the ghost of amusement, not the calibrating look. Something open. Something that has been building for 22 days under everything else. The outer territory's debt record on your family's farm, he says quietly. I had it cleared this morning. My chest locks. You did not have to. I know, he says. He lifts his hand and places it against the side of my face, and the warmth of it moves through me from the point of contact outward, and I do not move. Stay, he says. Not a command this time. Outside, Obsidian snorts. Chapter 10. The ceremony happens on a Friday morning in the outer courtyard, which is the largest open space in Frostfang Palace and fits 400 people standing. It fits 412 today. Every stable worker is in the front row. Gorse is there, standing straight with his permanent expression of personal offense at existence, and beside him Riv, who ironed his uniform. Behind them, the palace administrative staff, the commanders, the council members who were not arrested, 11 of the original 15 and beyond them, servants and guards, and every person who passed through the palace in the last 3 weeks and formed an opinion about the stable cleaner from the outer ridge territories. I am standing at the center of the courtyard in borrowed formal clothes that fit well enough because Kaler sent someone to have them fitted 2 days ago without mentioning it to me, and I am doing the specific work of not looking at my own hands. Because if I look at my hands, I will think about everything those hands did in the last 23 days, and I will not be able to hold my face together for the next 15 minutes. Kaler stands on the formal platform facing the courtyard. He is in full ceremonial dress. Every mark, every seal. He looks like the paintings of northern kings that hang in the corridor outside the archive room, except the paintings never capture the way he stands when he thinks no one is watching. The slight forward lean, the weight on the left foot, the jaw that never quite relaxes. He is watching me. He has been watching me since I walked in. The court herald reads the formal declaration, and I catch pieces of it. Misconduct charges dismissed, formal record expunged, outstanding contributions to Crown security. But mostly I am watching the front row, watching the stable workers, watching Gorse, and I am thinking about my first day, about the bucket that got kicked over, and the trough that was called Cloudy, and the commander who spoke about me to his aide as if I was furniture. The declaration ends. Kaler speaks. The title of royal advisor is not given on the basis of rank or bloodline, he says. It is given to the person in this kingdom who has demonstrated the clearest ability to perceive truth and the willingness to act on it regardless of personal cost. He pauses. In 23 days, Zeke Vic did more to protect this throne than 9 years of council proceedings managed to accomplish. The record will reflect that. He steps down from the platform. He crosses the courtyard toward me, and the 412 people watching go very quiet, and I hold still because my body has decided the safest strategy is to stop generating movement entirely. He stops in front of me. He reaches into the inner pocket of his ceremonial coat and takes out a small seal, the royal advisor mark, silver and square, the kind that authorizes documents and opens doors and tells every person in this kingdom that the one carrying it speaks with sanctioned authority. He puts it in my hand. Then he leans forward and says, quietly enough that only I can hear it, "You told me I didn't need to understand something for it to be useful. I've been thinking about that for 3 weeks. You were right. I also think you were talking about yourself." I look up at him. He holds my gaze for 2 seconds. Then he turns back toward the platform, and he raises his voice to the courtyard. In the northern tradition, he says, an alpha who claims a mate does so in front of witnesses. It is not a ceremony, it is a statement of fact. He turns and looks at me. Zeke Vic, this kingdom sees you. I see you. The courtyard does not make a sound. I look at him. My chest is doing something that does not have a name yet. I see you, I say back. From the edge of the courtyard, where the passage to the stable block opens onto the stone pavement, Obsidian has walked out on his own. The iron door is still lying on the stable floor where it has been since Chapter 9, and Kaler has not had it rehung, and apparently no one told Obsidian he was not invited to a formal ceremony. He surveys the 412 people, the banners, the commanders, the seal in my hand. Well, he says, in the voice that only I hear, it took 23 days and a partial demolition of palace architecture, but the outcome is acceptable. I press my lips together hard. I'd have preferred less drama, he adds. You cause half the drama, I say, barely moving my mouth. I cause the necessary half, he says. There is a distinction. Gorse is in the front row looking at me with an expression that has moved 1 full notch above baseline contempt, which for Gorse is essentially a standing ovation. Riv is smiling. The cavalry commander who spoke about me to his aide, as if I was furniture, is standing in the third row with the expression of a man who is doing quiet, private accounting. Kaler comes back to stand beside me, and his hand finds mine. And he does not perform the gesture, he simply does it, the way he does everything, with the flat certainty of a decision already made. And the truth that this whole story was always pointing toward the one that cost 9 years of careful planning to ignore and 23 days of a broke omega from the outer ridge to prove settles into the courtyard. The way real things settle. Wisdom ignored because of where it comes from destroys kingdoms. Truth spoken by unlikely voices still changes everything. Obsidian watches from the courtyard entrance. He snorts once. Then he goes back to his stable. The end. If this story moved you, if Zeke's journey from that cold stable floor to the center of that courtyard hit different, share it with someone who needs to hear it right now. Drop your thoughts in the comments and tell us what part stayed with you. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story on this channel. Every story here is built to remind you that the most powerful thing in any room is often the voice everyone decided to ignore.